The Woman in the Woods. Stefen's breath hangs in the air, frozen in place by winter's chill, his heavy metal blades slashing through the logs, splitting them seamlessly into firewood. Even still, having been chopping since just after sunrise, the strength flees from his arms and leaves them heavy as steel by his sides. After failing to wake before the sun had risen, Stefen's cruel father flew into a temper, hiding his winter cloak as punishment before throwing Stefen without it into the snow-flurried wind. The air grows cold and uncomfortable. How do you expect your brothers and I to relax from the bitter winds without a fire to warm the hearth? Yet we seem to have run out of logs for the flames, his father had said coldly. You won't taste a bite of food, nor a drop of water, not until this pile of wood stands taller than you, he explained, gesturing to the pitiful pile of twigs left next to the door. Take this if you're not too stupid to figure out how to use it, he said before throwing a small wood axe to Stefen's feet. In truth, Stefen is a small boy for his age, standing just under 5 feet tall at 16 years old. He was always treated as less than when compared to his larger and stronger brothers. His wavy hair is dark brown with a red tint when the sunlight strikes it. His father keeps it just long enough for the wind to constantly blow it into his blue-gray eyes. Freckles dot his cheeks and cover his nose, spreading over his arms and hands. His porcelain skin begins to prick with goosebumps as the sharp winds of winter bite at him. Yet even in this, with his small stature helping him to finish the pile sooner, it still would take hours to chop wood enough to complete the pile. Time slips away, and before he knows it, Stefen's axe splits the final log in two, leaving him with far too little wood for his pile to be complete. His heart sinks as he realizes what he must now do. I must go to the woods, Stefen says softly to the snow-flurried wind, pulling his axe up and out of the stump he had been using to split the firewood. As he heads off, the wind is bitterly sharp against his skin as if holding shards of ice in its unseen grasp, the chilling kiss piercing down Stefen's very bones. Finally, he reaches the tree line and breaks through the snowy wall of frost-covered leaves, entering the wintry woods. The thick snow which covers the trees blocks some of the sun from penetrating the canopy, leaving the woods with a cold and dark air about the place. Although the temperature has not changed, the trees now block the piercing winds from cutting through Stefen, giving him momentary relief from the sharp, icy chill. While he's still without an overcoat to warm him, this break in the winds helps him to move swiftly in search of wood to chop. After shaking the loose snow from his hair and face, Stefen spots a large tree that had fallen just further into the woods. The closer he gets, Stefen realizes it to be much larger than he initially realized. Just what I need, Stefen says, excited about his discovery. This should leave me with just enough wood to finish the pile. After many long and exhausting moments, Stefen finishes chopping the fallen tree, now having a pile far too large for him to carry back to his family home all on his own. Knowing better than to return home asking for help, Stefen sinks into a large pile of cold dead grass, clueless as to what he's going to do next. Resting for a moment to regain his strength, Stefen decides he simply must brave the icy winds and carry the wood back to the house a few logs at a time. He fills his arms with as many as he can hold, but just as he turns to head home, Stefen hears a sloshing sound coming from deeper within the woods. Being a boy with quite a curious temperament, he decides to investigate. Making sure to stay out of sight, Stefen keeps himself hidden in the overgrowth next to the main trail. Although he has never seen the end of it, his father says that it leads out to Woodfell, a village on the opposite end of the woods from their home. The sloshing sound seems to be drawing closer and closer to Stefen until he finally sees it. A large white sleigh being pulled by 2 snow-white stallions. The sleigh shines with such magnificence that he feels only one of the gods themselves could own such a thing. It appears to glisten softly in the light as if made entirely of polished ice and snow, and although the sleigh looks large enough to comfortably hold 7 or 8 people, only one woman sits at its head. A beautiful woman with snow-white hair sits cloaked in white silk lined with silver fur, holding something long and skinny in her hands. Whatever it is she holds seems to be reflecting so much light at Stefen that he cannot make out its true shape. Her face looks so perfect in complexion that the sharp chill in the air seems to have done nothing to irritate the woman's beautiful skin. As Stefen watches her, the beautiful woman does nothing. She simply sits there still as stone. Stefen patiently watches her for a moment, considering what to do next. Yet all the woman does is sit there unmoving, almost as though waiting. Finally, after several long moments of this persisting, Stefen decides to present himself to the beautiful woman. "Hello," he begins to say, but as she flashes her stunning eyes in his direction, Stefen feels nervous and at a loss for words. "What has led you to come here all alone in the wind so cold?" she asks. "And without a coat, too. Come near me, sweet boy, so that I may have a better look at you." Closer now to the beautiful woman than ever, he sees clearly that she holds what Stefen suspects to be an instrument of sorcery. Her sorceress instrument in particular seems to be made solely out of ice. The crystal-like handle, although cloudy and difficult to see through, is carved with many intricate signs and symbols. Below that, it comes to a short, sharp point that reflects glimmers of light with each movement. Above the handle, the wand rises up like an icicle filled with a cold light, making it 3 feet in length from tip to tip. "I see my wand has caught your eye," the woman says, noticing Stefen gazing upon it. "Worry not, my poor boy. You have nothing to fear of me," she explains softly, extending her hand in invitation for him to enter her sleigh. "My father sent me to chop wood for the fire," Stefen begins to explain, climbing the sleigh steps, his body shaking fiercely from the cold. The instant he is seated next to the woman, Stefen feels different. The winds have stopped completely and a gentle warmth washes over him, causing Stefen to feel as though a crackling fire warms his skin. "He is a wise man," she responds. "The air, after all, grows colder each moment, and soon the clouds will change, bringing a great blizzard to spread over this land. Even still, why do you walk unprotected through these numbing winds?" "Father expects me to rise before the sun each morning so that I may get a head start on my daily duties for the family," Stefen says. "But last night, my father had me out late in the woods gathering herbs in the event some sickness falls upon my brothers this winter. The moon was shining high overhead by the time I returned home, and so in my exhaustion, I slept past sunrise." The woman nods, her eyes full of understanding. "When father was awoken by the sun and found me still asleep, he took from me my winter cloak, demanding I am to chop firewood until the pile stands equal to me in height, saying that I will not taste food nor water until my task is complete. I chopped tirelessly all day until I was out of wood to cut and was forced to find fallen trees within these woods. Eventually, I had all I would need for my pile, but no way to carry it back home. That is when I heard your sleigh being pulled through the snow, and curious what the sound was, I now stand before you." The woman in all her beauty gazes deeply into Stefen's eyes, seeming to be studying their depths. She does this for a few moments, not saying a single word to him in the meantime. "You are a good soul, so I offer you my assistance. I shall use my sleigh to carry you and your firewood back to your home, if you only accept my help," the woman says. "Yes, please, if you have the time," he says. "Not having to carry the firewood a few at once would save me so much work." "Very well then," she says. "Where is it you've left the wood? We must collect that before returning." Stefen thinks to himself, trying to remember where he had come from. "That way," he says, pointing in the direction of the woodpile. Without a word from the woman, and seemingly before he had even answered, the stallions swiftly depart in the direction he points. The sleigh glides over the snow at what feels like an unnatural speed, moving so swiftly that in only a few moments he spots the pile of chopped wood growing larger in the distance. "There it is," Stefen says loudly, but his words are carried away by the rushing wind. "The horses are going to pass it if you don't tell them to slow down," he tries to explain as worry rises within him, shaking his voice. Yet she looks to the pile in silence, allowing the stallions to run ever more swiftly, moving beyond the pile of wood. Soon, even Stefen's home passes by in a blur before fading from sight. Suddenly, terror washes over his body, freezing Stefen in place where he sits. "Even if I could escape," he thinks, "the sleigh moves far too fast for me to get out without being hurt." So he does what his only option is. Stefen sits and waits to see where this mysterious woman shall take him. As they continue ever on, Stefen looks behind him, noticing something in the direction of his home. There is a light cloud of snow being kicked up behind the sleigh, yet this is typical of traveling during the winter season. The thing that draws his attention is how the kicked-up snow isn't simply dispersing, but rather beginning to grow larger as the sleigh moves forward. The snow-white clouds eventually form into what Stefen believes to be great dark clouds of winter storms. During this moment, while gazing into the clouds being created spontaneously as though through sorcery, Stefen wonders to himself if these are the same blizzard-bearing clouds the woman had spoken of earlier in the woods. They begin moving so swiftly that Stefen can hardly tell where they are. The land around them rushes by in blurred shapes. Even with the bright sun in the sky, he can make nothing out of the area they move through. When she finally stops and he can see again, Stefen finds himself to be in an unrecognizable place. In front of him sits, encircled by giant mountains on all sides, a beautiful castle. Narrow at the entrance, yet stretching vastly upward, the castle is formed mostly by large interconnected towers built of light gray stones. The woman had stopped on a long land bridge leading to its gates, and from what Stefen can see, this is the only way in or out of the castle. Countless windows cover its walls, all of which glimmer with light from within. Yet the great fortress sits on a large stone base, keeping the ground level of the castle towering high above the mountains below. Stefen considers making a run for it, as fear of this mysterious woman rises within him. Yet almost as though hearing his thoughts, she begins to speak. "Be calm, my child, for there is no danger here." Yet these words do little to soothe the young boy, taken against his will to an unknown place by a woman he has never met. "Where are we, and what are you going to do with me?" he says, tears filling his eyes. "Do not cry," she says in a voice soothing as cinnamon tea, using one of her arms to hug Stefen, pulling him closer to her. "My name is Kimonis, goddess of the winter winds. I am the daughter of Iras, goddess of air and distance. Without the help of another, my mother brought life to the Animus, the four goddesses of the winds. It is I who has the duty of draping frost over the realms of men, bringing blizzards to end the rule of my sister Porus, goddess of the bountiful winds of autumn. I've peered into your past and future, seen your abuse and suffering, and even gazed upon your pointless end. This life you live is not one befitting your kind heart and pure soul. Thus I have claimed you as mine, and I shall take you as my disciple," the goddess says. "My goddess," Stefen says, dropping his head in a respectful bow. "I don't understand," he responds, for the ideas behind these words are too grand for him to grasp. "Long ago, before even the gods came to be, there lived 3 divine beings. 2 of them came together and united their powers to create mankind. One formed man out of ancient stone, tying their fate to his will, the will of the sculptor, while the other breathed light and soul into them. This small gift of light can be grown, and once strong enough can be used to sever man's ties to the sculptor's will. This gives the wisest and most devoted among your race the ability to break free from fate and align their futures with that of the divine. And your fate, my sweet boy, was not one I believed you deserved. Using my sorcery, I have begun to sever this connection for you, though in return you must do something for me. Your tie to the sculptor's will cannot be destroyed completely and must be replaced with something else instead," she explains. "What is it that you have saved me from, and what is it I must do?" Stefen asks, searching his heart for bravery. "What your fate would have been, it is far beyond your understanding. One day perhaps you will understand those secrets, but now, my sweet boy, we must create for you a gem of sorcery." Although he can't grasp the words or concepts Kimona speaks of, he understands enough to know he has been saved from a terrible fate. For this he feels indebted to the goddess and is willing to do whatever he must. "What is a gem of sorcery, and how shall we retrieve one?" Stefen asks. "It is a gemstone which has been refined and enchanted through one of 2 methods. Scholars of the sacred mysteries would devote their lives to the research of sorcery, eventually gaining such an understanding of the craft that using a series of rituals, they could transform specific gems into instruments which they use to channel divine energy." "And what of the other way?" Stefen asks, afraid he is not wise enough to do this on his own. "Have no fear, Stefen, for the other way is divine devotion," her voice sweet as honey while she speaks. "Should you be capable of completing the rituals of devotion, we shall be able to draw great power into the gem, the power of the stars of frost. Once this power has been placed into it, we shall use the gem to craft an instrument of sorcery. The forces which all of us divine beings are made up of is the greatest power in all the realms. Using this, I will permanently sever the bonds that tie you to your predetermined fate, replacing them with a connection that binds your soul to my divine power. This will make you capable of studying and learning to command great forces far beyond the comprehension of ordinary men. More than this, the instrument of sorcery will also grant you a blissfully long life, so long as you live it in noble devotion," she finishes. "What rituals am I expected to do? When compared to even just my brothers, I am more feeble in both mind and body. Thus, I fear I possess not the strength nor the wisdom to complete what they may require of me," he says. "You have been chosen to rise above your fellow man, young Stefen. Push these doubtful thoughts from your mind, for I have selected you myself. There are many rituals for you to carry out, but we will address them as they each present themselves. For your first, the ritual of faith, you must collect the gemstone which we shall use during the final ritual. As I am the goddess of the winter winds, the gemstone which aligns most with my sorcery can be found at the peak of that mountain," she says, pointing towards the peak of the tallest mountain surrounding the castle. "This gem has yet to be seen by human eyes, and so in the language of man there is no name for it." "Then how shall I recognize it?" he asks. The goddess sits there for a moment before continuing to explain. "Long ago, in the ages of darkness, she begins. The gods waged violent war against each other. During these struggles, many were wounded and some even killed, their blood soaking into the ground where they fell. As I've told you before, the power which the gods are made up of is the greatest in all the realms. Because of this, our blood too is potent with sorcerous potential. As the divine blood began to soak deeper into the earth, it combined with gems and metals, refining and infusing them with divine energy. From this, all of the many precious materials were formed. Gems like rubies, sapphire, and emeralds, along with metals such as silver and gold, were created for the first time. Because their creation was so closely intertwined with the blood of the divine, these precious materials have unique connections to the gods and goddesses. The white gem that you seek, for example, possesses a deep connection with the chilling winds of winter, making it the only gemstone capable of safely containing the power of my sorcery of ice and snow. Yet I have no understanding of how to hew gems from the earth, nor do I possess the tools that must be needed to do so, he says. Must I do this alone, or will you come with me? Stefen asks. This task is yours alone to complete, Kimonis responds sweetly, for these rituals are no simple tasks to conquer. They were created long ago and take much study to even attempt, not intended to test your strength or speed, but to determine the character of your heart and soul. Though you shall face many struggles before this journey ends, it is through overcoming them that you shall be tempered into your true self. Only then shall you be capable of working the sorcery over the gem. Even still, I will grant you these gifts to assist in your endeavors, the goddess says, waving her icy wand over Stefen's body. As she does so, small sparkles of bright bluish-white light begin to fall from its tip, slowly drifting down like snowflakes before eventually landing in Stefen's lap. They gather into a pile, growing larger and glowing brighter as each spark adds to it, now too bright for Stefen to look directly at. He feels the pile of cold blue light suddenly become heavy. He squints his eye, trying to see what magic the goddess has placed over him, and just as the light finally fades away, Stefen sees two things sitting in his lap. The first is a paper map, intricately drawn and beautifully labeled. It depicts a seemingly straightforward path that would lead him through the mountains into the tallest peak that Kimonis had pointed. The second item is a small flute that is crafted of beautifully stained wood and features a hand-carved design. It portrays a young man dressed in priestly garments and playing a much larger flute than the one Stefen holds in his lap. The music from the man's flute floats up to the sky before returning back to him, forming a radiating glow around his body. The map, Kimonis explains, shall guide you to a great temple at the edge of the forest of darkness. There, a woman dwells more ancient than any man living, once a devoted priestess until her goddess abandoned her. Now she lives a cursed life in these mountains. High up in the unknown temple, she is the eternal priestess of Mr. Heractus, god of the mysterious arts. She has studied there for many centuries, in constant worship and devotion to the god. She possesses many lost arts, and long has she honed her skills in sorcery. At the steps of her temple, you shall present an offering that she will sacrifice to Mr. Heractus. If your offering is deemed worthy, he will pull from the earth the gem you seek. Anxiety and doubt flood over him. And if my offering is not deemed worthy, Stefen asks, what then will happen to me then? Will I be forced to return to the life I lived before? At these words the goddess rises, stepping out of her sleigh. As long as your heart and soul shine truly, no offering you sacrifice will go unaccepted. However, you must remember, along the trail to the temple you may hear or see many strange and intriguing things. These wonders are of no concern to you, and to them you must pay no attention. For as long as you keep to your path, nothing and no one can harm you. Before you leave, I shall place a protective enchantment upon you. Should you leave the path, however, it shall fade and cease to work, no longer sheltering you from the prying eyes of the monsters within these lands. Where is it you've brought me? Stefen asks. The lands of which you speak sound dangerous and unfamiliar to me. How far have we traveled from my home? He asks, and indeed the air around him feels warm and teeming with the fresh life of spring. Much different from the land which he had spent his life working, where winter currently rules the frozen skies. Perhaps she has brought him to the eastern lands where mysterious beasts roam. He has heard tales of how untamed these lands are, still teeming with wild monsters and spirits of the earth and air. Terrible beasts and dark creatures live deep within the mountains, some of which feast on flesh or need fresh bone and blood for their powerful sorcery. The goddess warns, ignoring Stefen's question. And the flute is an item of powerful enchantment. Should your faith shine truly, it will give you the power to reach out and call to me if you find yourself in need of help, she explains, extending her hand to Stefen as an offer to help him out of the sleigh. "Tomorrow you shall depart on your journey, but for today you will rest and gather your strength for the trials ahead. Come with me, and I shall show you to my home, the frozen castle, Puggaman Castrum," she says before taking his hand and leading him to the gates of the glorious castle. The gates are taller than any he has seen, looking to be forged completely of ice and snow. Sunlight glistens off their crystal bars, which have frozen over and fused shut where the two gates meet in the middle. The ice covering them looks to be acting as a lock. Even having the help of 20 men, Stefen doubts they would be able to pry them open. Yet with only the wave of her hand, Kimonis commands them to drift apart like a feather in the wind. Once through the gates, the two of them come to face a beautiful courtyard. Now lining both sides of Stefen are elegant sculptures carved of solid ice. Some depict small animals at play, while others are carved intricately into flowers or other icy plants. They move quickly through the courtyard, finally arriving at the entrance to the castle itself. They are met again by two large locked doors, this time built of dark polished oak rather than ice. Yet with another wave of her hand, they are flung open with a thud before he and the goddess enter the mysterious Puggaman Castrum. It is beautifully lit all around, yet he cannot tell where the lights in the room originate. "Puggaman Castrum and its enchanted walls," the goddess says, walking him toward a stone hallway. "Simply ask out loud whatever it is you need, and the castle shall accommodate you. Now, would you like me to show you to your room?" she asks. "I get my own room?" he responds. "Even at home I slept on the floor in front of the hearth, while my siblings and father rested in the 2 bedrooms, he says. "You shall enjoy many things in this new life, most of which will be far greater than having a room to yourself. But for now you need rest while I finish my duties," she says, stopping at a large wooden door and gesturing for Stefen to open it. "Food and drink are being prepared and shall be served to you here. I will return at sundown to deliver it. Until I do, you should rest and clean yourself, for you must be tired after all you've been through today," she says as he pushes the door open. "Thank you," he responds, "for everything you've done to help me." After hearing those words, the goddess looks down at him, smiling. "Rest well, my sweet boy. I shall return to you in time," she says, turning away and vanishing down the corridor. As Stefen examines the room closer, he finds it to be fully furnished. A large dark-framed bed, draped in wool blankets, sits in the middle of the room. 2 matching wooden wardrobes stand on each side of the bed, while a small table accompanied by 2 chairs sits neatly in the corner. Across the room from the table there sits, obscured by a thin decorated wooden panel, a bathtub already filled with steaming water. Seeing this, Stefen removes his clothes and sinks into the tub. When sundown finally arrives and Kimonis returns with the food, Stefen is finished with his bath but has fallen fast asleep in his bed. Rather than waking the exhausted boy, she decides to leave his food for whenever he awakes. Placing it on the table, she leaves him asleep to get as much rest as he can. Stefen stands on a great balcony, overlooking the courtyard as the sun begins to set. Just as the last of the light fades away, a voice begins to echo all around him. "You among men have been chosen, risen up and endowed with great purpose. He who bears the freezing winds to be a voice of the divine." The words are everywhere, echoing inside Stefen's head yet surrounding his body. The way they ring is almost musical, like the grand singing of a silver bell. "My daughter has chosen you, no more than a boy, to be tested as her devoted disciple. What do you think makes you worthy of this honor?" Stefen thinks for a moment, carefully deciding what to say in response. "I do not know why Kimonis has chosen me," he begins, "but she has saved me from a fate too terrible to understand. Thus, for as long as there's breath in my lungs and blood in my heart, I shall devote myself to Kimonis, glorious goddess of the winter winds." It is silent, until suddenly there is a hand placed on his shoulder. Stefen turns around to face the stranger. A tall woman faces him, her olive skin in beautiful contrast with the long black hair that flows down dark as midnight past her waist. Her eyes shine golden as she stands draped in brilliant sky-blue silken robes. "My name is Iras," the goddess says. "I am the goddess of air and distance," Stefen says, dropping down onto both knees. "Divine mother of the 4 winds," he says, looking up at her. Meeting the divine gaze and finding himself unable to leave it, Iris peers into his eyes, far more deeply than Kimonis had done in the woods earlier that day. After a few moments, she smiles down at him. "You already grow wise, young Stefen. I do believe you shall live up to the role placed upon you, should you survive the trials ahead." Suddenly, the wind begins to swirl all around him, moving so fast and loud that he can neither see nor hear anything. All at once the wind drops, and Stefen awakes wrapped in warm blankets, lying comfortably in his bed.